In the year 2023, the average American household threw away nearly 32% of the food it bought. That is over $1,000 of groceries wasted. Meanwhile, deep in rural Pennsylvania, an Amish family quietly loaded 3,500 pounds of food into their cellar and never once touched a freezer. Today, we step inside that system. The root cellar. Before a single jar is sealed or a single cut of meat is salted, the most important structure on an Amish property is already doing its work, underground, out of sight, and completely free to run. The root cellar is the foundation of everything. Built below the frost line, usually dug directly into a hillside or beneath the family home, it uses the earth itself as an insulator. The ground at that depth holds a temperature between 32 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. No electricity required, no compressor running. The planet simply holds that temperature steady, and the Amish put it to use. Inside, the conditions are equally precise. Humidity stays between 85 and 95%. That level of moisture prevents vegetables from drying out and shriveling. The cool air slows the release of ethylene gas, which is the natural compound responsible for ripening and eventual rot. By staying in that narrow temperature range, the cellar slows decomposition almost entirely. What goes in is equally deliberate. Potatoes are stored in the dark light causes them to green and sprout, making them inedible. Carrots, beets, and turnips rest in sawdust or sand, which holds their moisture without causing mold. Apples and pears sit on their own shelves, separated from vegetables because they release higher concentrations of ethylene. Cabbage is stored whole, its outer leaves left intact to protect the layers underneath. And what does not go in is just as important. Tomatoes ripen too quickly and contaminate neighboring produce with ethylene gas. Onions and garlic need dry air, not damp, so Amish women braid them and hang them in the barn instead. Nothing is stored carelessly. Every choice in that cellar is deliberate, tested across generations. By the time winter arrives, a single root cellar can hold hundreds of pounds of produce stable, fresh, and untouched by any outside power source. The smokehouse. Step off the main property and walk toward the edge of the farm. Past the garden beds, past the barn, there stands a small wooden structure, simple, unassuming, its walls darkened from years of use. This is the smokehouse, and what happens inside it is one of the oldest preservation methods in human history. The Amish do not smoke meat for flavor alone. They smoke it to make it last. The process begins before the meat ever enters the smokehouse. Every cut, hams, bacon, sausages, whole pork shoulders is first coated in a dry cure of coarse salt, sometimes combined with sugar or black pepper. Salt is the first line of defense. It draws moisture from the muscle tissue, and without moisture, bacteria cannot survive. The meat rests in this cure for days, sometimes weeks, depending on its size and thickness. Then comes the smoke. The Amish are particular about their wood. Hardwoods only hickory for a deep, strong flavor. Applewood for something sweeter, oak for a balanced and lasting smoke. Softwoods are never used because they release resins that contaminate the meat. The fire burns low and controlled. Cold smoking, kept below 85 degrees Fahrenheit, is used for longer preservation. It does not cook the meat but creates a surface layer that bacteria struggle to penetrate. Hot smoking above 165 degrees partially cooks the meat and results in a shorter but still substantial shelf life. The meat hangs in the smokehouse for days, sometimes for weeks. Hams smoked and cured through this full process have been documented to last up to 2 years when stored properly in a cool, dry space. No refrigerator, no preservatives, just salt, smoke, and patience. What comes out of the smokehouse is not just preserved food. It is protein that can sustain a family through the coldest months of the year, entirely on its own. Fermentation. There is a quiet corner in every Amish kitchen where stone crocks sit in a row, their lids weighted down, their contents slowly transforming. This is the fermentation station, and what is happening inside those crocks is not spoilage. It is science, ancient, reliable, and extraordinarily effective. Fermentation works by creating conditions that harmful bacteria cannot tolerate. When cabbage is shredded and packed tightly with salt, the salt draws liquid out of the plant cells. That liquid becomes the brine. Inside the brine, naturally occurring lactic acid bacteria begin to grow. They convert the sugars in the cabbage into lactic acid. As that acidity rises, dangerous pathogens, the ones that cause food poisoning and spoilage, are destroyed. What is left is sauerkraut, with a pH low enough to remain shelf-stable for months. The Amish have understood this process for generations, even without the scientific vocabulary to describe it. Their crocks are stoneware, the same type used for centuries because it does not react with the acidic brine. The cabbage is kept submerged beneath the liquid at all times. Air exposure leads to mold. Fermentation takes 3 to 4 weeks at room temperature and longer in cooler conditions. But sauerkraut is only one item in this system. Cucumbers become pickles and vinegar brine. Milk is cultured into kefir. Sausages are fermented with specific salt ratios before smoking. Even some fruits are preserved through natural acidification processes. What is most remarkable is that fermented foods do not merely survive storage, they improve nutritionally. The probiotics produced during fermentation support gut health. The lactic acid increases the bioavailability of nutrients already in the food. The Amish were not trying to create superfoods, they were simply trying to eat through winter. The nutritional result was a consequence of doing it right. Canning. Every August and September, the shelves inside an Amish kitchen begin to fill. Row by row, jar by jar, the summer harvest disappears into glass. By the time the first frost arrives, those shelves hold the entire winter, hundreds of sealed jars stacked floor to ceiling, representing months of careful work. Canning is the most labor-intensive part of Amish food preservation, and arguably the most important. The method splits into 2 distinct processes based on the food being preserved. High-acid foods, fruits, tomatoes, pickles, jams, are processed using water bath canning. The filled jars are submerged in boiling water for a set period of time. The heat kills bacteria and drives out air, creating a vacuum seal as the jar cools. Properly processed, a jar of peaches or tomato sauce remains safe and flavorful for up to a year. Low-acid foods require more. Meats, green beans, corn, carrots, these cannot be safely preserved with boiling water alone because the temperatures reached in a water bath are not high enough to eliminate all pathogens, including the bacteria responsible for botulism. For these foods, the Amish use pressure canning. A sealed pressure canner reaches temperatures above 240 degrees Fahrenheit, well beyond what open boiling can achieve. At that temperature, all harmful microorganisms are destroyed. Canned meat processed this way lasts 12 to 18 months. Amish pressure canners are built for off-grid use, heavy-gauge metal, designed for wood stoves and propane burners. A single canner holds 14 to 21 jars. On a full canning day, a family may process dozens of jars before evening. The canning season is not casual. It is organized, methodical, and relentless, because every jar sealed in September is a meal guaranteed in February. Dry storage. Not everything the Amish preserve requires salt, smoke, heat, or fermentation. Some foods simply need the right environment, cool, dry, and dark, and they will hold for months on their own. This is dry storage, and it is the quietest method in the system. The ideal conditions are between 50 and 60 degrees Fahrenheit with low humidity, a cool pantry, an upper cellar shelf, a ventilated barn corner. Any of these can work. Onions and garlic, which would rot in the damp of a root cellar, are instead braided by hand and hung in open air. The braiding is practical, not decorative. It allows airflow around every bulb, preventing moisture buildup and the mold that follows. Properly hung, a braid of onions lasts through the entire winter. Winter squash and sweet potatoes go into dry storage whole, their skins intact. The outer skin acts as a natural barrier against bacteria and moisture loss. Pumpkins are stored similarly. Grains, wheat, corn, oats are kept in sealed wooden barrels or cloth sacks in spaces where rodents cannot reach them. Dried herbs are bundled and hung upside down from rafters. Dried apple slices, strung on cords, retain their nutrition and sweetness for months. Sun-dried corn, once fully desiccated, becomes a durable pantry staple. Each of these foods requires almost no preparation to store. The labor is in the drying and the hanging. The rest is patience and a cool, dry room. Spring houses and ice. There is one challenge that root cellars, smokehouses, and fermentation crocks cannot fully solve: keeping dairy fresh. Milk, butter, and fresh cheese spoil quickly at room temperature, and unlike meat or vegetables, they cannot simply be salted or smoked into stability. The Amish solved this problem not with technology, but with geography. A spring house is a small stone or wooden structure built directly over a natural spring. The groundwater flowing beneath the floor maintains a constant temperature, typically between 40 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit, regardless of the season. That cold, steady flow chills the air inside the building. Crocks of milk are set on submerged shelves where the water can circulate around them. Butter is wrapped and lowered into the flow itself. The spring provides reliable, continuous refrigeration at zero operating cost. For communities without a natural spring nearby, ice houses fill the same role. Each January or February, when pond ice is at its thickest, entire communities gather to harvest it. Large blocks are cut from the surface, loaded onto sleds, and carried to insulated structures, basement-level rooms packed with sawdust or straw, which slows the melting dramatically. Ice stored this way persists well into summer. In some particularly well-insulated ice houses, blocks have lasted through August. During warmer months, that harvested ice becomes a refrigeration system. Food is placed in contact with the ice blocks, maintaining temperatures low enough to keep dairy safe. It is a system that requires no power, no parts, and no maintenance, only the discipline to harvest in winter for the needs of summer. The community factor. No single Amish family does all of this alone. That is, perhaps, the detail that gets overlooked most often when people study these preservation methods from the outside. The techniques are remarkable, but the reason they work at the scale of 3,500 pounds is the community behind them. During harvest season, neighbors arrive without being asked. Canning days become communal events. Women gather around long tables, filling jars, adjusting lids, monitoring pressure canners, passing recipes between generations in real time. An older woman demonstrates a fermentation technique she learned from her grandmother. A younger woman learns what temperature the sauerkraut crock should feel like on the outside when fermentation is active. This knowledge does not live in books, it transfers through proximity and repetition. For larger tasks, butchering, for example, groups of families coordinate together. A single butchering day can process several hogs, with each family contributing labor and leaving with their share of cured, smoked, and packaged meat. The division is not transactional. It is an extension of the same community logic that builds barns in a single afternoon. What this creates, across the full year, is a collective food security that no individual family could achieve on its own. One family's surplus of apples becomes another family's canned applesauce. One family's knowledge of dry curing fills the gap where another family's skill falls short. The 3,500 pounds is not just a number, it is the weight of a community working in alignment. 3,500 pounds. No freezer, no refrigerator, no electricity running through the walls. When you break it down, the root cellar full of root vegetables and fruits, the smokehouse hanging heavy with cured hams and sausages, the shelves lined with hundreds of sealed jars, the fermentation crocks working quietly in the corner, the dry storage of grains and braided onions, the spring house keeping the dairy cold, it stops sounding impossible. It starts sounding methodical.